What's up, everyone? It's Max Uhas here from the Dope Marketing Podcast, and I have a very special guest here, Toni Conn from Green Bliss CFO, who I had the pleasure of meeting in person in Detroit last year at
Lucky Leaf.
At Lucky Leaf, yeah. And Tony's probably, you meet a lot of people in this industry. You meet, and I could say, like, generally speaking, I have a brother that works in finance who kind of put me on to the whole Dope CFO group, and Toni was one of the members, and we connected, and she actually reached out, and we got to speak at the event. And I got to say, like, while most people that do finance stuff and like only talk finance, like, I can only keep a very limited bandwidth because it's just, I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Me and Toni have known each other now for almost a year, and she is one of the few accounting, budgeting, money people that can actually like talk to you and not like bore you to death and like educate you at the same time. So I threw I was like, hey, you want to come on and be interviewed? And Tony's officially, I wish I had a bell here, I'd ring a bell. She's officially the first guest on the Dope Marketing Podcast. So we're going to work out all the kinks here with Toni. Toni, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I know, like, ever since you announced the podcast, I'm like, can I be on it yet? Can I? Are you done? Are you ready? Come on, are you done? And you're like, my link is ready. And I'm like, yes. I had no idea I was number one. I thought other people totally beat me, but
No, I mean, I've had people be like, yeah, I want to do it. But they're like, can we talk about comedy or, you know what I mean? I'm like, no, like, this isn't that kind of show yet. So, so Toni, why is having a certified, all right, so first off, for those of you guys that don't know about the cannabis industry, and I'm not I do marketing, and I don't really handle any of the money stuff with anybody other than making sure that A, like, my clients make money, and B, like, my invoices get paid by my clients. But why is accounting and bookkeeping and keeping a good set of books and making sure that your tax stuff is in order so important for the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, running a business in general is hard enough as it is. Like, you have to keep track of all your documents, your financials. And for most people, they're terrified of it. Like, they don't look at their bank account because they don't want to know what's going on. And they don't budget. And it's just a thing they would rather not touch. And they just want to go play over here. But you can't do that in any business, much less the cannabis industry, particularly with what's going on right now. And with my experience, like, I'm credentialed through the IRS as an enrolled agent, been in the accounting industry, have with my previous experience, like, I bring that along with me, and the issues aren't any different. At the same time, there's so much more that you have to pay attention to in the cannabis industry in particular due to 280E. So those that aren't familiar with 280E.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, what is it for those that are not familiar with 280E? What is 280E?
Yep, 280E is for drugs that are on Schedule 1. So that's THC, cannabis, psychedelics. Now we're starting to see the psychedelic space start to open up a little.
Okay.
Banking is totally non-existent with psychedelic right now, whereas with cannabis, you do have cannabis-friendly banks. It's expensive, though. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize coming into the cannabis space is because cannabis is still federally illegal, you're going to have to pay more for insurance, for banking. Lawyers might pay more. You're going to need to hire more people to handle your inventory, because if your inventory isn't done right on point, you need a physical count, then all of your books and metric and everything are going to be wrong, because the seed to sale system, the accounting system, and your bookkeeping system, they don't talk well to each other. So at this point, we still need to do everything manually, and it starts with that physical count.
Yep. Yeah, and that sounds like, I just know from doing inventory, that just sounds like a ton of work, so.
It is. It is absolutely a ton of work. And you, even outside of the physical count for inventory, CEOs also wear a lot of hats, and time tracking is essential. If you
Yeah.
have multiple roles in your business, if you're on the floor for some time and you're in the back for other times, track that time, because the time that's plant touching and that's involved in production, we can throw that into cost of goods sold, which, well, we throw that into inventory, and then when things are sold, it goes into cost of goods sold, and then it lowers your net income. Long story short, you can't get around 280E, but you can master it. And I hope I'm not like throwing an avalanche at you all at once.
No, I'm already like,
It's a
yeah.
lot, but these are things that you need to consider. Like, so time tracking and inventory are in particular the main things that you want to keep track of, because part of mastering 280E is knowing what time and inventory that's going on, to so then we can,
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
I'm making sense.
No, I know, I get it.
And
Because
not talking in a circle, but there's a lot more to keep track of, and you're going to need more people to do it. And then even more so on the structuring side, I went to New Jersey. I think it was Canna One,
okay.
and there were a ton of consultants that were there. They're like, have multiple entities, do this and that and that. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, hold the phone. Like, no. Just because you have multiple entities does not mean that that's going to save you from 280E. The IRS will follow the money. They're not dumb.
Right. Right.
Like, just because you have, you see crazy stuff as far as entity stuff. Like, we look at
So
entities
wait,
as far as
so is this,
tax wise. Like,
so
don't
is that like the worst advice you've ever heard given to somebody, or is that
it's one of the big ones, because having multiple entities, one, it costs money, particularly depending on what state you're in. Like California,
right?
forget it. Like, it
Right.
also, it costs more money on the accounting side, because you're adding complexity that you probably don't need.
Right.
And then, yeah, and it just keeps rippling. Really, like, legally, you might want to have your real estate in a separate entity just for protection, but that's more of a legal side. Like, tax wise, there's no point.
Right.
And with accounting, like, we focus on like yeah, I mean, legal is involved, of course, but so many consultants are looking at it being like, hey, like, have multiple entities, you can get around 280E, and that's just incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So they're telling them to create separate entities for multiple. And yeah, because I just know from managing a few different sub niches and whatever, just the more things you throw into the mix, the money just gets more complex. You know what I mean? And it's like you move money from one account to the other account to this account to that account, and then what's it for? You know, and then it actually, yeah, it sometimes doubles, triples, quadruples the amount of bookkeeping and money tracking that you have to do. And does it actually save you more in the long run, or does it just create more of a headache in the long run?
Yeah, on the tax side, the more entities you have, the more of a headache it is, because
Ugh.
it's more work for us on the back end to track things. There's more, and if you have more than, one bank account, that there's nothing wrong with having more than one bank account, but that also adds to the expense. It's just, my point is, like, you don't want to unnecessarily complicate things for a reason that it's not going to work for. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right.
if consultants are telling you do this to get around to 80E, and that's just not true. And I just want to make sure that people know.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't do it. Like, and now if your lawyer is trying to protect assets, that's completely different. Like, an asset other than like cash and getting around tax things. But like I said, when it comes to real estate, that's a different story.
Right. Well, who would do that though? Would that just be people that are trying to get like if, let's just say you ran a different business outside of your cannabis business? Would that essentially be like the other entity thing, or is that if you're only cannabis and only like, let's just say you're a grower and a distributor and a manufacturer and you run a dispensary and you run a delivery service, is it better to have that all under one, or do you want to keep that separate? Or
if they're all plant touching, 280E applies to all of them.
So you might as well just keep it all under one, right?
There's one instance where it's the Champs case, the tax court case. They won.
Okay.
They won their case only. Well, I'm not going to say only. There are multiple reasons why they won their case. The majority of what they do is a wellness center. They had cannabis on the side. Their revenue from providing cannabis was like 2% of their revenues. And they had completely separate everything, a separate building, separate books, separate employees, like everything was completely separate. So it's not that it can't be done, just the amount of time that it takes to do that. Like most businesses don't have good books anyway, and to try and like make a separate entity and play that game, like it's just not it's not advisable. And a lot of cannabis companies, they're not starting a wellness center and then adding cannabis on the side. They're trying to sell like non-canna things to try and shove money over there, and it doesn't work. The IRS is gonna see.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, for those of you who can't already tell, Toni knows what she's talking about. But also I feel like Champs is a different story because I mean they were a massive company versus like a small mom and pop one and done dispensary versus like, hey, we're a huge brand that has the time and the resources and the money and the financial backing to put all these different things into place versus like, hey, I know when we were in what's it called? We were in Detroit, and I know when I was in Albuquerque last year, right before the state went legal, there were hundreds of people just running around thinking that they got the golden ticket. It was kind of like they won the Willy Wonka thing. Like, I got the golden ticket, I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to make $1 million in my dispensary. And they didn't, there's so much education. That's part of the reason I started doing this podcast. Is part of the reason that we got into this industry, because there's so much misinformation. There's so much lack of knowledge on what people are doing or what they need to do. Just in general, because I think most people are blinded by the potential profit of the industry versus like the work it actually takes to A, maintain, B, stay within compliance, C, do it the right way. And of course, now there's the money tracking, there's the books, there's the inventory, there's the, and then taxes. Because, and this is the thing, I'm putting a massive disclaimer on everything I say. I am not a licensed money person. I pay a bookkeeper. I pay an accountant. They hate me because I'm just like, I don't understand. What do you need? And this is where somebody like Toni comes in to help, because 9 times out of 10, just from my experience, if you're a grower, if you're a dispensary owner, you're not the money person. Okay. You may collect the money. You may see the money. You may see the money hit your bank account, but how much of that is actually yours? How much of that is actually the government's? How much of that is actually the state's? How do you delineate that in regards to like profit versus, what you can reinvest back, what you can do to pick up your inventory. Is there anything specifically that anybody should know beyond this? Because I feel like if I talk about this, I'm just going to confuse people. So,
And I mean, going along the line of disclaimers, like, yes, I'm an enrolled agent and do accounting, but I'm not, those that are listening, I'm not your accountant. So like things are, case specific, and a lot of things like you say all the time with different questions, our favorite answer, it depends.
Right. Yeah. Especially when it comes to marketing too. So, well, what kind of results can we expect? It depends, I think especially with money and books and inventory, I hate to say it depends, but it
I mean,
depends.
there are basic things that you can look at and you can start, is that every business is going to need. The main thing that I try and have everyone start with is what we call a perpetual data room. So it's a cloud storage solution that you own as a business, and you would give someone like myself access to, and we would organize it for you, make sure all your corporate docs are in there, all your tax returns are in there, we put all your financials. There's even an HR folder in there for all of your forms, just to make sure that every single piece of paper, your receipts, like everything that is on the books can be tied out in the data room, and it's all ready to go. Because in the event of an audit, we want to be able for them to like take a peek in there and go, oh no, you're good. You're good. We see everything. We see all these receipts. We see this spreadsheet that ties out every journal entry and where we can find the documentation to support it, and it's all ready to go.
Okay. So here's a dumb question, because I have a friend of mine who used to work in a couple different dispensaries in California. You're not supposed to be able to pay your employees in weed, right? That's an actual serious question, because I've heard this story before, where it's like, yeah, they paid us in weed, and I was like, I don't think that's how it's that's how it's supposed to be done.
I've seen it done. It's supposed to be. It's messy.
Is it?
It's so messy.
Is that legal though, or you just? I mean,
a lot of times it depends on the state and like gifts and what's going on. Yeah.
Really? So essentially messy. You're volunteering and you get reimbursed in weed, and then that's something, or that just sounds messy to me.
It is very messy, and it depends. There's a lot involved.
Yeah. So obviously that goes on a state by state basis, and just because it's not federally legal, there is no. I mean, obviously there's 280E for federal, but each state is different too. So
each state is different. Each state is completely different as far as what they allow and what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very messy.
So essentially,
in general, like
you can't hire somebody that like works in California to like come and do your books in Colorado, because it doesn't apply the same way, right?
Can you repeat that question again?
Okay, so like let's just say if I ran a cannabis dispensary in California, right, and we decided to branch out to Colorado or one of these new emerging states like New York or New Jersey or Maryland or Missouri. I'm assuming it's a whole different setup and a whole different set of paperwork or
yes. Okay. Yeah. So the license requirements are completely different by state. And in some cases, depending on which license type you get, they have different requirements too. But it's all in there, all the way down to your fence needs to be this high and you need to have this type of security.
Wow. Yeah. So I can almost say that what you do is pretty essential for all right. So let's all right. So what's the worst situation that you've ever had to like audit for somebody? Without giving names. Let's just say nightmare scenario, right? Like because I know that this is something just personally from a business standpoint, as a business owner, I have love-hate relationships with my money people, because it's such a pain. You know what I mean? Because like you see this, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go and the business is making money, and then there's someone like you that's like, hold on, slow down. Like you actually don't have as much as you think you have. Or you have to take a chunk of this and put it away for taxes or put it away for this. What's the nightmare? Like, yeah. So actually, let's just say to help people avoid this scenario in the future, what's one of the worst, like you've done an audit, like what's the worst audit situation that you've ever looked at?
I mean, the worst thing is, not having documentation at all. Like it goes back to the data room, like you don't have receipts. There's nothing, like you're scrambling to show them anything. and nothing, what we call it, to where it's tied out, to where like what we put in the books, there's physical documentation to support it. So even down to like you go out to dinner with a potential client and you need to have the receipt for that. You need to put their name on it, the date, and if they eventually provide revenue in the future, like if you can go back to that receipt and be like, they paid me this much money this year.
Okay.
So that way during audit, the IRS is like, oh, all right, so this expense is valid because they paid you this much as a service, and or they bought this much in product. Because I work with those that are plant touching and not plant touching too. But
Right.
even as it all falls down to documentation, because the IRS is looking back at what you did previously. So we're helping you set things in place. I mean, we'll help you clean up too, like from previous years. And then we want to make sure that starting now, you're going to be okay.
Gotcha. But cleanup's
A lot of
probably a
time.
lot messier than if somebody's actually doing it right from the beginning.
Most aren't.
Yeah.
Like it's the number one question I ask people. I'm like, do you have a data room that stores things? And they're like, I have a pile on my desk that I need to scan in.
I think that's pretty common. Or a filing cabinet that I just shove everything into that it's kind of like my junk drawer. Like
It is very common, and it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, there are virtual offices that can scan all your mail for you. I mean, even like buying things online, you just save the email as a PDF and you're good.
Right. Now, does that work with anybody that pays you? Or so when you're saying like you take somebody out to dinner, whether they're paying you or not paying you at the moment, if you go back a year and say like, hey, I've had 6 meetings or 6 business meetings with this person, and it took this long to close the deal, is that all under the same thing? Or
I mean, ideally as long as you put the name of the person on the receipt, and then if they're in your accounting system if they're in a system as a customer, then they'll be able to tie it back.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and then from a flower touching standpoint, don't you have to don't you have to keep track of where you get all of your supplying you, and then how it's being done? And then like basically from farm to distro to everything. Like, have you seen people not keep track of where they're buying their inventory from?
I mean, every state has requirements of where things need to be tracked from where they go. Yeah, and it's not always correct, because depending on what technology they're using, they might be missing things, and that's why the physical count is so important.
Right. So do you recommend a physical count on top of like paper trail?
Always.
Just to double check and make sure it's good, right?
Yeah, the physical count is what we're going to base everything off of, because you have the physical count, and then you have whoever is putting things into your seed to sale system, and then if you have somebody else helping you with your books, or if you try and integrate them together with some form of technology, we need that physical count to look at everything and be like, that's wrong, it needs to be this, that's wrong, it needs to be this, that's wrong, it needs to be this.
Okay. And then
it all starts with the physical count.
So if there's like a massive discrepancy between your digital and your like your hand done inventory count, what can be done with that?
I mean, we just explained the discrepancy. It happens all the time.
I believe it. Like, because it's weight, right? Because it's essentially done by weight, and
in some cases the units are completely different.
What, like kilograms to pounds or ounces? Like
ounces to grams, yeah.
Jeez. Okay.
It depends on your settings. Like, 'cause if you put one thing in your accounting software versus metric, yeah, it can get real messy real quick.
Now here's a weird question. Are the companies that supply the digital tracking for this in any way, shape, or form liable for any discrepancies on their part if their software sucks?
I doubt it.
Probably not, right?
They probably have something. They probably have. I mean, you know how litigious everything is. They probably have something in their contract where like we're not responsible for things not going well.
Right.
Because I mean that's why I say like yeah, there are companies out there that say that you can integrate things between each other, but I would always go with the physical count and work off of that.
Right. Versus
trying to find a shortcut that, because even then, like it just, the technology just isn't there yet. And the fact that there's so much on the line, I wouldn't risk it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's scary. That's really scary, especially technology. I mean, there's always tech issues too, you know, and whether it's cloud storage, whether it's that, you know, if you're listening, I think you understand the importance of a perpetual data room versus trusting your cloud storage or your whatever. Like, I think this is where redundancy really helps.
Yes. I mean, cloud storage is one thing, but you also want to have a backup as well. I mean, there's one vendor in particular that I use for mine. I have to double check if they're cannabis friendly. I'll make a note.
Okay. Yeah, because that just seems yeah, there's a reason I pay my accountant and I pay a bookkeeper, because it's like that's a whole other full-time gig by itself. And I can only imagine being a dispensary owner who or a grower or whatever who just spends all of their time in the mix. The last thing you want to do is after an 8-10 hour day go and do your books or your inventory for even 30 minutes to maybe an hour or two, just to make sure, depending on the sales, depending on the volume, depending on what's happening, it's too much. It's too much.
Yeah, and, the document management is a lot in and of itself. And then on top of it, like particularly if there's like, if there are only a few of you, you know, you have to, whoever draws the short straw.
Oh man.
Do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, so I don't know what else. Is there anything else that anybody absolutely needs to know about why this is so important? You know, why having a CFO for your cannabis business is so important. I mean, are there actually, you know what? Here's a good question. So with all these new emerging markets, right? And obviously like laws are changing on a pretty regular basis, because this is essentially still the Wild West of the industry. I don't know where the actual question was going in like that, but is this something like, I feel like having someone like you to come and look at their numbers, their books is just so vital versus trying to keep up to date with the local tax laws. Because I've met people who legitimately were like, no, I've got a good bookkeeper, or no, I've got a good accountant, and no, they don't understand 280E, but how hard can it be? Like,
I mean, are they doing cost accounting? That's question number one. Okay. And I'll send you, I have a lead magnet actually that is like questions to ask your cannabis accountant to see if they're good or not. So like, are they doing cost accounting? Do they know about 471? Like, are they doing this? Are they doing that? Yep.
Okay, hold on.
I'd be happy to supply that.
Yeah, please, because I feel like there's a lot of you know, it's like, oh, it can't be that hard, you know. And I feel like with an industry like this,
yeah, and then there are others who are completely on the other side, where they're like, no, they're like, I'm banking money for my lawyer pot, so that when eventually I'm going to need a lawyer for this, like, because you know, normal businesses do this all the time. They just wait until they need to go to tax court, and the government's like, oh, you owe 100,000, just give us 30, you're cool. And they're thinking that it's going to be the same in cannabis. I'm like, no,
I'm
sorry.
No.
Please don't.
Wow.
No, absolutely not.
So these are
That's
real
one of the
conversations
craziest
you have
stories
with
I've
people?
heard.
Really? So like dead ass, they're like, I don't want it. I don't need somebody like you because I'm just putting all my money into a lawyer account to fight the audit, or just
They're like, I know the audit's coming. I'm just gonna, pretend that I can deduct all of these things, and then eventually, when the IRS comes calling, I'll just, all this money I've saved up for my lawyer, I'll just let them deal with it, and I won't have to pay as much because that's how the IRS works. I'm like, no, this is cannabis.
right,
how many
right,
how many tax court how many tax court cases have you read?
right, right. Because what? Oh man, I can't even with that. Like that is that's not like running a gas station to where you're like, oh yeah, no, these Snapples didn't sell. I'm just gonna write them off. Like, oh geez, okay, wow, you gotta love people. Because I feel like it's the same kind of thing with what we do because there's thousands of more. I mean, there's probably millions of quote unquote digital marketing agencies out there right now. The same way there's probably millions of, not millions of CFOs, but like there's probably thousands of CFOs and like millions of accountants and bookkeepers who are really good at general business, but when it comes to like being specialized in an industry, I think having a specialization to an industry is a plus too, just especially when it comes to like, hey, I know this industry and this is all we do, and yeah, it's not like, well, this works for everybody else. I don't know why it wouldn't work for you, because that's not really an argument that holds up during an audit or during a court case, does it?
No, not at all. And that's one of the benefits of being part of the Dope CFO network. I mean, there's hundreds of us all
Right.
over the country, and we're all, like the leader of the group, the AICPA, which is the Association for CPAs. He speaks at their conference every year, and he's their go-to guy on cannabis. Like, they don't want to touch it because they're understaffed as it is, but they're like, we know it's important and eventually we'll get there, but like, can you just come and talk about it?
Wow.
And it's a great network to be in. So regardless of what state you're in, like, my team and I are able to help you, even though like I'm Michigan based, but I mean, I've had clients everywhere.
Yeah. Boy.
Working remotely. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the beauty of this day and age too, where it's like you can work remotely. You don't necessarily have to be in the building or in the back in a room with stacks of paperwork. Like, what was I watching? I don't know. I was watching some television show. I was like, God, technology just made things so much better for so many people. At the same time, it's kind of like screwed up some other stuff, but it's like it's made things so much easier to where it's like I don't have to be in a room with just these giant ledgers of every transaction anymore. There's technology to help that. Oh man, there was something you said that I really wanted to like reach on. But now I'm drawing a brain fart. I don't know. Is there any advice you want to give to people about this, or because I mean
it's less advice, but more of like, do you have someone in your corner that knows to ADE and cost accounting that will have everything ready to go come audit time? Because if you don't, then that's probably something that you want to look into.
That's actually what I wanted to bring up. So audit wise, because I know what I've heard, but you're actually in it. So essentially, from a business standpoint, audits happen how much more often for cannabis companies than any other regular company?
For cannabis, I'm not sure on the percentage, but I know the IRS has hired a lot more people to do more audits because they're realizing how much money there is in it. With it being federally illegal still, they know that there's so much tax money that they can go for.
Right.
So they've hired more people specifically to do it. I'm not sure of the percentage offhand, but I know it's significantly higher than it was.
Just for cannabis audits. So
Mm-hmm.
they've literally hired on new people just to come in and audit cannabis companies in general.
Yeah, the money that they can get from the cannabis space is insane. I mean, you see it in the news all the time. This company owes this much, this company owes that much, like, and I'm talking millions of dollars.
Right. Right. Now, how quickly does that take to accumulate for them to owe that much if they haven't been doing it the right way? Is that over a quarter, a couple months, couple years, or does it depend on
It depends. It depends on the business. Like, these are big companies that get into the news.
Right.
But the audit, I want to say, I mean, they do reach back into the past to like 3, 4, 5 years as well. So it's not just now and the future that you want to pay attention to, but like, are you okay like previously? And the longer you let that go and the more money you make, the worse it's going to be, because
Right.
your risk is just going to be higher.
Right. So they can go back 4 or 5 years to look at everything, and ooh, that's scary. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, because from what I've always heard, it's not necessarily an if, it's a when. Like when you get audited.
Exactly.
Yeah, because just for this industry, because there is such a magnifying glass like scope on everybody that gets into it. Like essentially, you should know going in that like, hey, you're gonna get audited. Like you're gonna get, somebody's gonna come and ask for your books. And I feel like, so here, I know because I don't work in flower touching businesses, but is this something where they literally send somebody to your business in like with the suits and the everything and the briefcases, or is it just like an email thing? Or because
I mean, they can, but the IRS is mostly they work through snail mail first.
Okay, so they send emails that probably
don't.
lost in your inbox,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually it could turn into somebody showing up at your business door and saying, "Hey, I work with the IRS. Let me see your books." And then what happens?
But they start with the mail first and then go on from there.
All right. So if you haven't already figured out why this is important, I think this should be an eye opener for a lot of people. Because at least having somebody in your corner that says, "Oh yeah, I can show you all that," without having to go crazy. Boy. Yeah, that was it. Actually, it was the audit thing, because I feel like the audit thing is really the scariest, and having a lawyer fund isn't necessarily the same thing as actually having good books.
Absolutely not. It's just that's one of the. I mean, there's absolutely no guarantee, even on non-plant touching businesses. There's no guarantee that the IRS is going to be like, oh yeah, just if you owe 100,000, just give us 30, you're fine. Like. Right. I don't understand why that's the mentality. Like maybe they just watch a ton of movies. I don't know.
I feel it. Well, that's part. I mean that's yeah. I think part of a ton of movies is probably part of it. To where it's like, oh no, I've seen this. I saw that documentary, or I watched that video, or saw this, or I saw it on YouTube, or I saw it on TikTok, or to where it's like this is where I get my education. On a lot of this.
And I mean, there's the mentality of, well, eventually it's going to be legal, and then it won't matter. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true. Like, just because it becomes legal, that doesn't mean that the IRS is going to all of a sudden like backdate. It's not like you can go ahead and go back and refix your books because it's legal now. Like, that's not how any IRS changes work.
Right.
That's why I get emails every day about changes that the IRS is doing, and they're year by year. And I mean, sometimes they go back and change things, but I doubt if they make it federally legal in the future that they're going to be like, oh yeah, you can redo all your books and we'll give you your tax money back. Yeah. I don't see that happening, but a lot of people are waiting.
How the government works, really. A lot of times.
A lot of people are waiting for when it becomes legal they're like, it'll be okay once it becomes legal. I'm like, it's not how that's going to work.
No.
There's no way the IRS is going to just all of a sudden give back all of this money that they've gotten
boy.
from it being illegal right now.
Right. Yeah, because no, that's not how it happens. All right, cool. Well, Tony, is there anything you want to leave anybody else with on this, or?
If you're looking to get in touch with me, my website is on the screen. For those that are listening, it's greenblisscfo.com. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, but I honestly forget about it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not the only one.
I feel like you're either on Twitter all the time or you're just completely off of it because it's an ADHD nightmare. Yeah. So for those of you that didn't hear, it's Toni Conn. It's 2 N's, and it's greenblisscfo.com. I absolutely recommend hitting her up, talking to her, and if you're looking for a cannabis specific. Oh, that was the other question. Does this apply to CBD or anything else, or is this only THC?
THC only.
THC only, right?
The 280E part. However, if you are CBD or hemp, the data room still applies because you can still also be audited. Like, honestly, every business should have a data room. Like,
Right.
Who are we kidding? Like, but in particular with the cannabis industry, because it's not if you're going to be get audited, it's when the data room and have everything tied out is particularly important. But all businesses, regardless of whether you're THC or not, should have the same system. Like, I don't change as far as like the data room and tying everything out, I don't change that depending on whether you're plant touching or not. It's just more the nuances of like, do you have inventory? Do you not? Like,
Right.
Those nuances are like more product or service specific, but the data room, tying everything out from what's in the books to the documentation, that's done regardless of where you are in the industry.
Wow.
And whether you're plant touching or not.
Well, definitely good knowledge here. Hopefully everybody gets to listen, reach out to you. So cool. Well, Tony, I want to thank you for being my first official guest on the podcast for sure. And yeah, reach out to Toni. It's Green Bliss CFO. She's good people. She's knowledgeable. And if you can't tell already, I think having somebody that can handle your money that could also speak in layman's terms, you know what I mean? And not just like numbers, is essential. Especially given all the people that I've met in this industry who are not necessarily numbers people, or just people, having somebody that can actually communicate with you and let you know what you need and how you need it and what's going to happen is super crucial to the success of your business. So once again, Toni, thank you so much for being on. Great to have in your corner. That's all I'm going to say. So reach out and we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. End the